My name is Adam Cheatham, Director of Strategy and Transformation at Third Stage Consulting Group, and today we're going to talk about software selection and strategy. I'm here with Brian Potts, our Chief Operating Officer at Third Stage Consulting Group, who's going to help us through this conversation.
Cool. Thanks, Adam. Great to be talking to you about this. I know you've been through a whole lot of software evaluations, selections, digital strategies. When a client comes to you and says, look, we need a new ERP, what's the first thing that you recommend they do? What's the first step? They've got the executive alignment, they've said, okay, we need new ERP, we got signed off on that, but what's the next step?
Before you even want to talk about having your own new ERP, you want to talk about why, and you want to talk about what it is your business expects to do. If you don't know where your business is heading in the future and what it is your next 2, 3, 5 years looks like, trying to put in a software that enables that type of success is really difficult to do, and usually ends up as a bit of an awry task from the very beginning, because it's not pointed in the same direction. It's really easy to get your conversations on technology and business transformation separate if you don't have a strategy that clearly delineates what direction you're heading from the beginning.
Okay. So there's a whole bunch of ERP. Do you know how many ERPs are on the market?
There are like thousands.
Right. There's thousands of softwares out there. How do you begin a selection? So you talked about understanding your business, but frankly, every software says they can handle your business because they want your business.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And one of the things that you need to know is know about your business first before you start teaching software selection vendors or software vendors in general about what it is your business does and how it is they can fit. Because if you don't know your business well enough in the direction that you want to go, the possibilities are endless, and all of a sudden you end up with an apples to oranges comparison. What you really want to be able to do is be able to say, I'm going to head in this direction. This is what makes me unique. I always like to talk about what it is your strategic goals are, as well as your strategic competitive advantages. Your advantage may be high quality. All of our manufacturing comes through at the most pristine level of quality possible, and we want to make sure that as you select the software, it enables that.
Okay. And are you finding more or less, call it best of breed, bolt-on solutions or hybrid solutions? It seems like we might be moving in that direction from, call it just a single core ERP that does everything for everybody.
Yeah, and that's a growing trend in the industry, and that's what we see a lot is almost like a pendulum swing. You know, for a long time when you ended up with the AS400 systems and stuff like that, you ended up with a high level of customization, a bunch of this, that, and the other type of software systems that handle very specific siloed needs and processes. And then you kind of started moving towards this customization is bad. We need this all to be within one core ERP system that fits all of your needs. And now we're starting to diversify in the industry a little bit more from a perspective of that best in breed approach, where HCM and CRM are great examples of software systems that can augment a core system, where you may end up with something a little bit smaller that's a little bit less expensive core ERP in one add-on, as opposed to buying the full-blown tier 1 system that can do everything and all things under the sun, because you want to pay for the core in one add-on that supports that competitive advantage that you have in the marketplace, as opposed to paying for all of the extra functionality that you're never going to use.
Okay. So is this idea of selection, frankly, something that a company can do by themselves? I mean, because I know we offer software evaluation services, but you always get the question of, and run into clients who are doing their own selections. What do you see as the possibility of that?
Yeah, for starters, confusion. You get a lot of scenarios where you have two softwares that frankly can do a lot of things, and two sales guys that are telling you about all of the things that their softwares can do, and that you got this list of 100,000 things that it can do, and you are inevitably stuck comparing two separate lists of strengths, where you're not just buying a software for the strengths, you're also buying it for the weaknesses as well. If you don't know what those weaknesses are up front, and respect that in your process. That's a common pitfall of folks that try to do it themselves, because they end up in a sales cycle, and you end up with folks that are showing you all the things that they like to show and all the things that they are pretty cool, right? You walk into a car dealership and you sit in one of the little BMW convertibles, and they would tell you, yeah, it's fast, it's fun, this, that, and the other, and then they're not paying attention to the fact that people like me are 6'4" and don't fit. They don't care. They're going to sell me on speed and the open air and things like that. And somebody else who I might talk to might sell me something different. And being able to compare two sets of great things is very different than having the right help and guiding you through the process on focusing on your needs and making the selection about that. And a lot of companies that we find, particularly in software selections that we rescue, that's really where they forget. It's like, what about us? What about our business? That's who it's about. It's about you. And your software selection should respect that. And you should have a partner who can really be an extension of your team and help you through that process.
Okay. So in looking for help then from an outside firm, how do you differentiate on what to look for, what kind of firm to bring in? I mean, there's all kinds of varied options out there.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question, and one that trips a lot of people up. What you want to look for is somebody who doesn't sell the actual software systems and is objective and independent and, frankly, technology agnostic. You want to be working with a partner that looks at your business and says, these are the pieces of technology that may fit that, as opposed to looking at your business and saying, okay, well, I sell software A and software B and software C, so now we have a short list. Now we'll compare those three, and we'll run your selection on which one of those is the best fit for you. None of them might be right. Like we said before, there are quite a large number of software opportunities out there, and when you start blending in a best of breed idea, this gets really complicated really fast. And to be working with somebody who has that confirmation bias that our systems are the best systems, so we don't need to look at the other ones, really narrows this down to a field that is not in your best interest to be have such blinders on in your selection.
Okay, so dive into that just a little bit more, and this is another topic that's a little bit passionate for me, is looking at, call it boutique independent firms versus the bigger players, the big five, the large consultancies. What are some of the advantages, disadvantages of using one of the bigger players? Because we run into that a lot with the software evaluation.
Well, when you're using one of the bigger players, you're talking to somebody who has the capital and the money to throw at you. That also means that they have the resources to overwhelm you, and that's really the caveat, right? You have a brand, you have a well-known organization that is known worldwide, and they can pull resources from every corner of the earth to help you out. That's true. But in most cases, when that happens, they're not pulling those resources from the corners of the earth to replace the resources that you already have. They're pulling them from the corners of the earth to put them all on your project. And there really isn't an incentive for them to pay attention to what it is you need. They're incentivized in a way that's designed to provide more people to your project in a way that allows them to overwhelm you. And then once you have it, it's a team of 30 consultants in this type of a scenario could be small. And think about now your core team of maybe 10 if you're a large organization, and a couple of project managers and a sponsor and a small steering committee. You could be so overwhelmed by the number of people that it's hard to even know what each person is doing. And let alone whether or not they're adding value or whether or not you're just paying for their training because they're quote unquote billable on your project. And that's really where we see a lot of our clients get overwhelmed in the idea of some of the larger organizations. That's not to say that a larger organization is wrong for everybody, but you want to know what's right for you. And if what's right for you is somebody that is able to be an extension of your team, pay attention to what it is you are looking for, what your business needs, and then take an approach that allows your software to be an enabler of those needs and an enabler of your strategy. That's really what you want to focus on.
Okay. So how do you handle it when you've got multiple stakeholders in an organization that have different perspectives? Maybe they've got a bias, or they were using another software in their previous company. Another one likes, has a good experience with the sales approach on another. You've got, competing ideas of what is best for the organization. Some of it might be self-driven. Some of it might be misunderstanding. So how do you structure, called a governance process, core team decision process to handle those kind of things?
Yeah, there's a lot wrapped up in that. And the very first place that you start is at that level of executive alignment. If you're not aligned at the top, you're not going to be aligned at the layers below that. It's just not possible. Then that's where you really find the most of that competing interest. But if you say at the very top, I have, to go back to the prior example, our competitive advantage is quality, and our strategic 3 to 5 year outlook is to create the most widgets at the highest level of quality so that we flood the industry with the best possible things that they can do, albeit at a premium price. If that's where you're going to head, then things like warehouse management, where somebody may say, I need to be able to track this, that, and the other, maybe not as important as that quality inspection process within production, as well as the procurement side of your materials. If that's where your focus is as a business and as a strategy, and your executives set it that way, then everything else starts to kind of be built up to support that strategy. Whereas if you don't have it from the top, it's easy to, particularly for folks in finance who control all the money and are going to be able to tell you, well, this software isn't really going to pay off as much of a return, and they'll find numbers to do it. I've seen it 100 times where finance says, this is the software because it's the one that I want, and they make the numbers. The statistics don't lie, but liars use statistics, right? I should have a good statistic for this, but I don't. The general point here is that if you don't have your strategy set at the top, you open yourself up to those opportunities for my section is more important than yours, and a little bit more of an unwieldy nature of your selection. And then you start with folks that disagree on those types of things, and they start making decisions that aren't compatible or in some cases directly contradictory to where it is the company wants to head in the future.
Okay, so based on what you said, you recommend involving the broader user group in the evaluation?
Yes, I'd recommend involving as many layers of the organization as you can. You start at the top, of course, with the executives, but you also have to set up a governance structure that enables you to not just select the software, but implement it in a way that supports that strategy. So when you have a clear vision from the top, then you have a core team that supports it. Very often you have a core team of anywhere, 3 to 5 if you're small, 6 to 8 if you're a larger, medium-sized company, and then possibly even larger than that if you're a very large organization. But that core team becomes your ear to the ground on where things are headed, what are the decisions that should be made, and they're enabled to make those decisions. And if they come to a crossroads where the decision is difficult to make, they then know to bring in that executive steering committee for additional guidance.
Where this all leads is you're going to select a software that you've got to implement. Given the high number of implementation failures, and Eric and others have talked about that quite a bit, is there a way that you can start to avoid implementation failure during the software evaluation cycle?
Just by starting the software evaluation cycle is is a good place to begin that conversation, right? Just buying a software off the shelf and saying we're going to cram it in really is a recipe for a disaster. There's some of the things that are red flags to me when I hear from clients. Zero customization. Well, nobody gets away with zero customization. It's just not possible. Learning through the software selection process and having that be an educational experience and being able to plan your implementation along the way, focus on your strategic goals that will inform your software selection, and then move into your implementation are really another space that allows for mitigating and eliminating the risk of failure early in the selection process. I always consider the selection as the first step in the implementation. So technically, if you, in my opinion, if you start just pick a software and go, you've skipped the very first stages of your implementation, and now all of a sudden it's like running downhill as opposed to taking it slowly and casually in a way that allows you to take in everything that's happening and understand what it is that means for you.
Okay. So there's concepts, parts of implementation success that you can essentially move into selection. What other concepts come to mind? I mean, organizational change or planning or process work.
Yep. Change management is an important component of it. Of the 5 most common challenges and failure points that we pulled up in our 2020 ERP report, 4 of them are change management, and the 5th is data readiness, right? None of them are actually the technology. It's change management, and you really start that change management process in the selection by not only gaining that executive alignment, but by involving people in the process. When you keep people in the dark on what's going to happen to them, or just make it happen to them, where they have to react to that as opposed to see it coming, they react pretty negatively. That's when the water cooler talk takes over, the rumor mill takes over, and all of a sudden the messaging around this implementation is that it's being crammed down our throats and we had nothing to do with it. But in the software selection, you start that process of change management and mitigating that negative message very early by saying, what do you do? What are some of the things that you see this company is going to gain from this software implementation? What are some of the things that you need? And then when you start involving them in the process of talking about what they need and what they want, you also involve them in the demonstration process, so they not only see what's coming, they're also involved in that decision where they get to see it, they get to feel it, they get to drive, in a sense, test drive it, so that they can provide feedback on, this is the type of software system that's really going to change my value proposition to this company for the better, as opposed to, that's the type of software system that I wasn't involved in this, so how could I possibly tell you whether or not this is going to be better for me? So change management's a good one. The planning side of it, the readiness side of it, it takes time to plan these things. It takes time to get ready for them. In planning them, it could be as simple as, do we want to go with a big bang approach, or do we want to go with more of a phased approach where we start with, say, for a global organization, do we want to just do, Asia Pacific and then focus on Europe and the Middle East? Do we want to just go around the sun global implementation, big bang all at once? How do you want to do that? And making those decisions up front allows you to plan for them and put your organization in place so that when your implementer does come in, whether they're small, medium, or large, you don't end up with that army of consultants that is just going, because that's what they did on the last one. And ERP implementations take a long time, so finding somebody that's done more than one of them, more than 2 of them, and starting to end up in the, I've done this enough times to know the difference, really is something that is hard to do. So planning it on your side, because you know more about your business than anybody else, is important. And then making sure that you're ready for this type of a change, knowing whether or not this is going to be something that is a massive undertaking. Should we take things really very slow? Are we the type of organization that handles change badly? Are we okay with some of the risks of moving fast? Or are we not? Those types of planning components really put you in a spot where your implementation that starts with the selection is now moving into the project planning phase for the actual installation and configuration of software with a plan.
That makes sense. So one very pointed question. If you could give one piece of advice to a company that's looking at an ERP selection process, what would that be?
Focus on your business. Focus on what it is your business needs and does, and focus on your pain points within that business. What is it that you're trying to gain from this? Nobody goes through an ERP implementation because it's fast, cheap, and easy. And the converse of that being expensive, takes a long time, and really difficult. You want those pains to be worth it in the end, and allowing your business to drive that selection as opposed to making the tail wag the dog with the technology driving the conversation is really not the right way to do it.
Business first. I like it.
Well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate all the insightful questions and the guidance through this process. I enjoyed the conversation as well. Thanks again for joining us. If you like the contents of this video, please subscribe to the Third Stage Consulting YouTube channel. And if you'd like to continue this conversation, you'll find my contact information below, and would love to chat with you.